5 years ago, this man, who we'll call Mike, was accused of sexually abusing 2 boys while working in a North Wales children's home. He faced his accusers in court. He was acquitted, cleared of all the charges against him. He now faces the prospect of having to defend himself against the same allegations all over again.
I just couldn't believe it. It was just disbelief, it was horror. I couldn't believe that anyone would say this, because I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. I knew I'd never committed any offences to children. And yeah, it was just a start.
The popular image of North Wales, unspoilt beauty and tranquility, has been shattered by horrific allegations of abuse in children's homes like these going back 20 years. Newspapers have reported suspicions of paedophile rings. In total, 7 former care workers and 2 foster parents have been convicted of sexual or physical abuse since 1977. What were these rooms used for at the front of the house?
All the front rooms at the top were male dormitories.
Steve Mesham says he was abused here and in other care homes in the 1970s and 80s.
The main games room where all the young girls and boys...
There have been no convictions in this former home, today used as offices, but several others are now alleging abuse here. He says he made complaints at the time, but nothing was done.
When I was in care, I was beaten up on a regular basis by several members of staff throughout the years. I was also sexually abused in every single home I went into. And if you made complaints, you were transferred from home to home. And you would be abused there, exactly in the same way.
A tribunal of inquiry has been set up by the government to investigate cases like Steve's. It starts next week, and so far 175 people alleging abuse and over 80 alleged abusers have been called to give evidence. But many former staff say they're innocent, falsely accused after a massive police trawl for victims. Some believe their accusers are motivated by the prospect of compensation. Other difficulties with child abuse investigations going back so far will further complicate the tribunal's task. Some of the allegations concern Bryn Estyn, which closed in 1984. 3 former staff have been convicted of sexual or physical abuse. One's appealing. After a major police investigation starting in 1991. Mike, who worked at Bryn Estyn and was acquitted, suspects, though he has no concrete evidence, that his accusers made false charges so they could later claim damages.
The allegations only came about when the police were interviewing numerous children. It was done when everybody was being interviewed. Never brought these allegations by themselves solely. It was, if you like, it was amongst all the hysteria of all this allegations of abuse and paedophile ring within the Bryn Estyn.
Why do you think they made these allegations?
Personally, there's only one reason: it's financial reward.
Now, this is the amount of unused evidence you might expect to find in one of these cases.
Mike's solicitor is applying to the tribunal to have the allegations concerning him withdrawn.
The particular client has been through 4 or 5 horrendous years. Very serious allegations were made about him. He was subsequently acquitted of all charges. In fact, the jury acquitted him in 10 minutes. Yet he is now being asked to face those same allegations again. And it seems to me to fly in the face of natural justice.
Peggy Humphreys believes her son lied about abuse to make money.
That's Mark.
He later committed suicide after a libel trial involving his allegations. She and her daughters say he originally told police nothing happened, but changed his story after he heard about compensation.
These 2 detectives came to my house and they asked for Mark. when my other son was there, well, he heard the whole conversation, didn't he? And Mark said, I don't know what you're talking about. Nothing
Because he
happened.
even asked Derek,
They asked Derek.
did he know anything about Bryn Estyn? And Derek said, no, I don't know nothing.
But why then do you think he made these allegations?
For the money.
And for the money.
So how did Mark get to hear about the potential for compensation?
Well, these detectives told him. That came to the house.
Malcolm King was chairman of Clwyd Social Services Committee from 1990 to April 96. He played a key role in uncovering allegations of abuse in care homes after he was appointed. He believes abuse is rife nationally.
It's quite clear from research, for instance, that's been done from Manchester University, funded from the Home Office, that there are something like 250 active paedophile rings in Britain. At least those are the ones that are known about at any one time or are being prosecuted at any one time. So there really is a lot of evidence of widespread, organised child abuse in Britain.
He accepts people knew about the prospect of compensation, but he believes that was not their motive for coming forward.
My own experience of talking to many abuse survivors is that the very last thing that they are looking for is compensation. Many people who are aware that they could claim compensation haven't done so. Really, in terms of priorities, I think the first thing that emerges from everybody is not even that the truth should come out so far as they're concerned, but is their desire to make sure it never happens to anyone else.
Further concerns about the risk of profit-motivated allegations were raised by an advertent story in a North Wales newspaper last September. Solicitors from Leicester were urging victims to come forward in time for the tribunal. The article mentioned they'd won compensation for those abused in the brutal pin-down regime in children's homes in Staffordshire. Victims are worried it could enable guilty people to go free by claiming the allegations are purely motivated by money. How would people get off because of the advert?
Well, basically, by saying that, oh, they jumped on the bandwagon, made these false allegations, and members of staff are getting accused of things they didn't do. Because let's be fair in this, we're not accusing all members of staff. There's a lot of good staff around. Some of these homes were not bad places. They were just bad places because they had certain staff in. You can't accuse everybody.
The investigation here in North Wales was originally the biggest ever into allegations of abuse of children while in care. But now at least 12 other police forces across the UK are conducting similar major inquiries. Several have launched public appeals for former residents who may have been abused to come forward. And solicitors are already offering to fight for compensation. One of the largest operations is across the border in Cheshire.
We brought the two of them and put them in this cage at first.
This woman claims she was caught up in a climate of hysteria about allegations of abuse in children's homes in Cheshire. She also blames solicitors, she says, for effectively advertising their services in fighting for compensation.
I do believe that a lot of the allegations are made for compensation, not necessarily compensation from the Criminal Injuries Board, but actually from the organisation and from the Social Services Department, because over the last few years there's been an awful lot in the media about the amounts of compensation that actually has been given out. You're looking not at 1,000 or 2,000, but there's been sums of 150,000 mentioned in some cases.
Was there much publicity in your case?
Yes, I mean, particularly what's really angered and upset me, I mean, one local paper actually advertised for people to come forward. I mean, it's got paedophile group abuse children. This is before the court case. It asks for victims urged to come forward, mentions about compensation, helping them with compensation, and then lists names, including myself, in it. So really left me wide open for anyone at all to say anything.
Peter Garsden is coordinating claims from over 100 solicitors with clients from former care homes. He sees no problem with actively seeking out victims. Although he did not place any adverts, publicity featuring him clearly linked appeals for victims to come forward with the prospect of compensation.
No, we haven't been appealing for victims. We've been calling for a public inquiry.
Well, I'm sorry, but you have featured in stories that I have seen with headlines, solicitors' appeals for victims to come forward. Do you think that that sort of publicity could encourage people who are out for money to make up stories of abuse?
There are social care records that can back up what they say or don't say. There are psychologists who will prepare long reports which test not only what the symptoms are, but test whether or not they're telling the truth, because we've been very careful about that. So, no, I'm sorry, I can't accept what you say.
Alan Levy was chairman of the Pindown inquiry in 1991, which investigated brutal methods of control and restraint in children's homes in Staffordshire. He too is conscious of the risk that the prospect of compensation could encourage false allegations.
When I chaired the Pindown inquiry, the findings eventually led to insurers offering about £2 million to a number of children. So this may well attract, or could have attracted, some false allegations. So it is a possibility that has to be considered, but I don't think one should go overboard about it, but be aware of it.
Personally, I'm not claiming compensation at this moment in time. This moment in time, this is about justice. This is about getting the whole truth to come out so it cannot happen again.
I was arrested 5 years ago. It took 5 years from the arrest to go to court. I went to court. I was acquitted. And now I've got to face these allegations again, or criticisms at the tribunal. When will it ever end?
We were granted an exclusive interview with Sir Ronald Waterhouse, the judge who's chairing the tribunal. I put some of these delicate points to him and asked him first of all whether he was concerned that compensation could encourage false allegations.
Well, at the tribunal, we obviously will have to take into consideration that one motive that might affect a particular witness is the possibility of a claim for compensation arising out of the matters in respect of which he's giving evidence. But that is by no means a problem unique to this tribunal. It arises in many forms, in different forms of litigation and criminal prosecution, so that all I would say about it is that it is a factor. The tribunal will be aware of it, and to the extent that it arises in the case of any particular witness, it's likely to be tested in cross-examination.
In the North Wales case, we have spoken to a former care worker who was charged with serious sexual offences, has been acquitted, found not guilty, who is going to have to go through all that again at the tribunal. Doesn't that fly in the face of natural justice?
Well, I'm very conscious of the problem of double jeopardy, as lawyers call it. In general, if you're acquitted of an offence, you don't have to stand trial for it again. As far as the present tribunal is concerned, I'm glad to say that the problem is a limited one. As far as I am aware at the moment, only one person has been charged and acquitted. And we shall, of course, look at the evidence that is tendered in respect of that person with particular care, bearing in mind what has occurred in criminal proceedings.
But is it fair or just that someone who's been acquitted should have to face this tribunal at all?
Well, the fact is that the witness may well be able to give evidence about matters in relation to the conduct of the home, which is relevant to our inquiry. Equally, the circumstances in which the allegation was made, for example, will be relevant to an overall consideration of what was happening. and it may be of relevance in considering the credibility of allegations against other persons.
Child abuse allegations are notoriously difficult to investigate. How do you distinguish between true and false allegations?
Well, that is an impossible question. You listen to the evidence. You bear in mind that the allegation is a very serious one, but ultimately you have to use your experience of life to test the credibility of a witness, to make your own assessment.
In an atmosphere of growing public fear that our children's homes may have harboured paedophiles for decades, even the experienced Sir Ronald and his colleagues on the tribunal may find it difficult to determine what was really going on behind these doors.